Welcome our next panel, LA100, a 100% carbon-free energy future for Los Angeles, moderated by Lauren Faber O'Connor, Chief Sustainability Officer for the Office of Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I really appreciate LABC for having me back this year to moderate another really exciting panel, a topic that I care so deeply about. And I believe the discussion of LA100 really brings together the whole theme of the day, the theme of this work, which is meeting the urgency of the moment that we're in with climate change at our doorstep, going further, faster with our own leadership and our own resources and our ability to scale and have a outsized impact, and providing a model, therefore, for others around the country and around the world. And just to start out, that in March of this year, LADWP, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, released LA100, which is an unprecedented study in scale and scope to model a grid as complicated as LA's, and model it to understand pathways to 100% renewable energy. And I won't bury the lead. After 3.5 years, 100 million simulations, partnerships with multiple academic partners, over 50 people sitting on a advisory group that met for months and months and months over these years, hours of their time spent on this work, we found that 100% renewable energy in Los Angeles is not only achievable, it's reliable and affordable. And we can get there faster than we thought. And that led Mayor Garcetti to, just in April, announce a 10-year acceleration of our zero carbon grid goal, a key foundational goal to LA's Green New Deal, a 10-year acceleration to 2035, first in the nation to make that type of commitment. And I'll have to say and thank LABC for being with us every step along the way. So let's get started, peel back the layers, and understand better LA100 and how we're going to get there. So I just want to tell you who we're joined by today. First, we have Jason Rondou, who's the director of Clean Energy LA, our Clean Energy LA strategy at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. We have Mike Garland, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Pattern Energy. Jonathan Port, President of PermaCity, a division of Catalyze. Jason Barrett, Senior Vice President for Sales at GAF Energy. And Meg Arnold, Senior Vice President for Market Transformation at the LA Cleantech Incubator. And you can find more about them and their bios that are available on the event website. So we're just going to get right into it. Jason Rondou, I'm going to start with you. I work closest, I would say, with you out of this group. You have been living and breathing LA100 for a number of years now. In fact, I think we both managed to become first-time parents to little girls throughout this process. So from work babies to real babies, person babies, I think it's given us a renewed perspective on the importance of this work, the impact of our work, because in 2035, our daughters are going to be teenagers just in high school. So I want to understand from you, your perspective of this historic work, and really how have you seen this impact the utility, the evolution of the department over the course of working with NREL, the evolution both in terms of our technological capabilities and understandings within the department, and how we view stakeholder engagement, stakeholder input, the whole process. How have you seen DWP respond?
Yeah, and you really put it in perspective there. When you look back when, just a few years ago, things have changed so much. And yeah, we are parents now, but over the last several years, it has been just really a gift to be involved in that, both professionally, but also for LADWP and for the city. And we've gotten so much out of this study. Looking back several years ago, by no means were we kind of sitting on our hands. We had made really significant strides on decarbonizing the grid and ensuring that we're setting ourselves up to try to achieve some of these goals. But there's a big unknown, and that big unknown is how do you get from really high levels of renewable energy to fully decarbonizing the grid, and how can you do it in a way that's reliable and a way that's equitable, and a way that ensures that we're going to do this right, and we're going to do it in a way that can actually other utilities can be inspired, and other states and other countries can be inspired by it. And looking back several years ago, we're municipally owned utility. We own or control our resources, and so that puts us in a really strong position to be able to get resources and renewable resources into the city. We've got a lot of transmission lines that used to bring in a lot of fossil fuel resources to the city, but we also can repurpose a lot of that stuff for renewable energy. We're about 37% renewable today, so we're over half carbon free today. And we're the number one. Many people have said this today. We're the number one city for solar in the United States, and we have been for a number of years. And a large part of that is doing really innovative programs like the feed-in tariff, which LABC has been a big sponsor of. But I talked about how do you get from really high levels of renewable energy to 100%. And so this, and you mentioned this, is a 3-year process. We had advisory group members that have invested 3+ years of their professional careers into helping us shape this study. And we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. We did this through COVID, so we transitioned to all virtual. We got this thing done on schedule. We're extraordinarily proud of the product, and it gave us many things. It gave us tools. So you mentioned this, our modeling capability. We were already thought of as our integrated resource modeling skill set was already industry leading. This took it up another notch and has kept us on the leading edge of modeling techniques. It has provided a stakeholder model. We're going to continue this model through our planning process in the future, bringing in folks and really integrating them into the process to help them understand how complex power planning is, to help us understand what they care about and what they're experts in. And it's really a model that we see, really suiting us and really suiting stakeholders going forward. We know that we can do this equitably, but it's going to take a lot of work to do it equitably. We need to make sure that, we're also a leader in sort of equity metrics. We need to figure out how to put that into action and ensure that as we transform this city, that we do it in a way that's equitable and is affordable for all of Los Angeles. Lastly, I'll just kind of leave it here and just say it has really reinvigorated us. Goals are fantastic, but having a path to that goal is very different. And so now when you have folks within the department, folks that care about the department, folks that care about decarbonizing, we have a path and we know how to get there now. So it has really reinvigorated us and just, put us in a position to succeed here, but also be really ecstatic to do it. So we're excited about it.
Thanks, Jason. And I agree. I think just, observing the department's, excitement and confidence and, vigor around, we understand sort of we've demystified the effort is really exciting. And we're going to come more onto the topics of equity in a little bit. I'm going to stick with some technology topics for a bit. And, NREL and DWP, another question for you, Jason, but NREL and DWP together identified, regardless of the pathway we might choose, a number of no regrets actions to take, many of which, thankfully, DWP was already well down, the line on, such as, continuing to pursue large scale renewables, continuing to pursue distributed in-basin, distributed generation, solar and storage, starting down transmission projects to get the energy into the city. One of the areas that NREL also identified as a really important area of advancement and technology innovation needed is around green hydrogen. This is an opportunity that DWP has really taken the ball and run with it, again, understanding the potential outsized influence it can have on the market. So can you talk a little bit about DWP's planning for and helping to advance the technology around green hydrogen and expedite it as much as possible?
Yeah, so you mentioned this with regards to the LA100 study. There are, no matter how we get to 100%, there are many ways to get there. We know that, of course, we need a lot of renewables. We know that we need to bring those renewables to the city and bring it into the city with transmission lines. We know that we needed a whole lot of storage and a whole lot of solar locally. We need a lot of local resources. But one of the key things is we need some type of renewable long duration storage, and we need it within the city. And the reason we need it is because there are challenges with running a grid. You know, you have high heat days, you have things like wildfires, you have things like earthquakes. In the 94 Northridge earthquake, we lost all of our capability to import power into the city. We also need to make sure that, you know, should that happen again, if there's a wildfire, we lose our ability to import power into the city, we need to make sure that we can provide reliable power. And the way to do that, and we found this with the LA100 study, is through renewable resources like green hydrogen. And, you know, we have really played a leadership role in trying to mature green hydrogen. And chief among them is the Intermountain Power Project. So that is a coal power plant that has historically provided reliable, low cost, but very GHG intensive power to the city of Los Angeles. And so that's going to be decommissioned in a few years here, and it's going to be rebuilt as a green hydrogen generating facility. And that's fantastic. But a lot of that is because that location lends itself well to green hydrogen. It's located in Delta, Utah. There's a lot of low cost renewable resources that when, you know, we don't need a lot of solar, and when wind is blowing and we don't have a lot of high demand, we can use that green energy to make green hydrogen and store it. There's also a salt cavern there. So there's a lot of really unique characteristics. But what we need to do is develop that and try to figure out how to do it locally here in Los Angeles. How can we do that and make sure that we can provide that local, green, renewable resource here? And part of that is we need to invest in things like High Deal. So we just recently announced the High Deal partnership, which is the first regional collaborative effort to help drive down the price of hydrogen. So we're trying to get that to about $1.50 a kilogram. And I believe today it's over, $10 a kilogram. And so, partnerships like that, we're not going to be able to do it alone. We're going to play a leadership role, but we need others to come along with us. In addition to that, we know that we need to take efforts like modernizing some of our key generating stations. And part of that is we're soon going to advertise a solicitation to help encourage the industry propose to us how we can decarbonize our generating stations and how we can do it fast. Because the reality is, with a 2035 date, we've got just a little over a decade to do all of this work. And it's really an unprecedented amount of work.
Thanks, Jason. So partnership and more of everything. So I want to turn to Mike here, who's been instrumental in some really important and exciting projects in Los Angeles. The Red Cloud Wind Project is transformational for us. And, Pattern Energy is constructing the Western Spirit Wind Project in New Mexico. That's a gigawatt of power, a third of it going to be servicing DWP, servicing LA. And as you're aware, all the scenarios studied in LADWP or in LA100 really do show significant scaling of wind for Los Angeles, upwards of 7 gigawatts or so. So how is that attainable? How are we going to do it?
Well, thanks, Lauren, and thanks for the question, and thank you for inviting me here and everybody involved with the extraordinary LA100 study. It is pretty amazing, and I know we're going to touch on it some more later, so I won't give my remarks about that right now. But there's tremendous untapped wind resources in the West, and I know that the LA100 study identified that there's limited wind in California, in part because of permitting restrictions and other things. But when you add out-of-state and in-state wind resources that can be tapped, it's 10, 20 gigawatts of available resource. And these are the best resources really are in New Mexico and Wyoming. And even the neighboring states in Washington and Nevada and other places certainly have resources that can be brought in as well. But the very best resources in New Mexico and Wyoming can be brought in at very low cost relative to low cost. And it's really, the key is unlocking the transmission to get it to the states. When I look at 7 gigawatts, there's 6 to 7 gigawatts essentially ready now to be able to be brought into California. as early as 2025 and maybe even earlier, because our 1,000 megawatt project you mentioned will be operational at the end of this year. There's still a little bit of power left that we haven't contracted away that LADWP could contract for. But if you look at our follow-on project, it's 3,000. It actually can go up to 4,500 megawatts, and it's slated to come into service in late 2025. You have the Transwest project, which is 3,000 megawatts or so that can be completed by 2026. There's several other projects like that that are out there. I'd like to invite Jason, since I'm on this panel with him, out to New Mexico to show him Western Spirits. I mean, it's hard to get your mind around these 1,000 megawatt mega projects. Really, this Western Spirits is the first one in North America, and maybe one of the few in the world of this scale being done at once. And so it's showing that these big scale projects can get done, and they require the transmission, and that's probably the longest lead time. And like I said, there's a number of these projects that have actually been worked out and in terms of permitting the transmission line and all that can be built in time to meet the LA 100 study goals. The one thing I'd say is LADWP is quite sophisticated for a utility, I think. And the way to get to 6 gigawatts is through a comprehensive working relationship between LADWP and sponsors like ourselves to define the timelines LADWP's need, including if they want shake beam products that they would like from us, and upgrades to the system to unlock valuable transmission, allowing greater resource access. So to me, that's how it's going to get done and can get done. It's all the technology have been identified and we know how to do it. It's a matter of really rolling up our sleeves and getting down to the modeling exercise of what's the priorities and how to get them done.
I'm glad to hear that you're saying we're about to be awash in wind, because LA 100 shows that we can meet our goals with upwards of 70 to 80% wind and solar alone. So really exciting to hear that those resources are going to, show up and be made available. You touched on one potential hurdle or an area of need with regard to building transmission capacity. And so wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how big of a hurdle you see this to be and what are some potential solutions?
Yeah, it is a huge hurdle, but it's also, as I said, there's a number of projects that have been in the works for a long time that can help meet the demand. We in the Western Spirit project, we bundled transmission rights with the wind to be able to enable us to deliver to the LADWC system. I think we went through 3 or 4 different transmission systems to get the 331 megawatts to LADWP. So that work has to go on and is going on as to how you evaluate these different transmission lines. How do you get access to those transmission rights to get it to the right place at the right time? But I think that LADWP has actually done an enormous job of going out and starting to look at where can you make differences, like Jason mentioned, shutting down these coal plants or converting gas plants and so on. Those are the things that we need to understand, and we do. We've seen a lot of what they've been talking about doing and all. Having access to those transmission capacities to bring in power is what you got to model and work through. But the one thing I would say is, with great vision like the LA 100 comes great innovation. I mean, our industry is really exploding with good ideas, and I'll tell you, it's been a while since this really has happened. My company conceived and actually built a innovative transmission project in Northern California called Transbay Cable that runs through the San Francisco Bay to access power into San Francisco. That was unlocking the private sector with regulated utilities and the public sector and trying to come up with creative ways to meet demand and restrictions. San Francisco was like a U-shaped, and we were able to complete the loop, which is critical for transmission reliability. And by bringing folks together with a vision that LA 100's put out there, I think you're going to see just a lot of different ideas of how to open up the grid and make these things realized that will allow for greater wind and solar access on the grid. But that's probably the key next step, is to really focus on modeling the system and identifying those important steps that have to be taken to allow some of these resources to get to market, to get to the LA market.
Thank you. Yes, big focus I know that the department has on transmission and peeling away at the number of years that we think it might take to build out the needs, and finding where those transmission rights exist with bundled with energy already. So that's great. I want to turn from wind to solar, to in-basin solar, and turn over to Jonathan Port. You are also a pioneer in local solar here in Los Angeles, and it's been really exciting to work with you over the years. But as you know, and as you can see, we're looking to a need to scale from a few hundred megawatts at a time of rooftop solar to gigawatts. And so, in your experience working in the city for so long, what have you learned that we need to be doing to really make sure we can have that kind of scaling of distributed generation renewables and storage? Can you speak to how your business model has been addressing that? We'd love to hear how you've been solving for making sure we can get to that scale and pace. And you're on mute, Jonathan, so come on off.
Got the unmuted. Okay, Lauren, thank you very much. It's really been an honor to work with you and a lot of members of this panel. I mean, we've gone actually from kilowatts when I started the company to the dream of megawatts to multi-megawatts. In back of me, that 16.5 megawatts was the largest in the world at the time. If we could just hit the slides, I got 3 brief slides that should kind of really give everyone a good understanding. So this is kind of key considerations for doing the DG and CNI for the in-basin. What we're all really grappling with, or what we've been, is permitting, capital, and especially transaction complexity. We've solved a lot of these to get to megawatts, but on the other side, if we want to get to gigawatts, what it's going to take. And in the middle here, we said what's going to take, and this is what we've done as a company. We've gone to extreme standardization. I invented SolarStrap, it's patented. The city told us to get our own building code. We did that. It took 5 years. We secured pretty much unlimited financing, not just through us, but we have 2 other players that we brought to LA. So LA really has unlimited financing now to get to DG. And of course, there's the storage and innovation through our company. We've acquired storage, and of course, we're all about innovation. What does that mean? When we get to the new beginning, we want it to be sustainable, equitable, and most of all, to get there in around 10 years, it's got to be achievable. So we've evaluated that. To the next slide. So from the beginning, the market's been really playing with energy as a tenant. Not everyone can afford or wants to own and maintain their own system. And probably, if you look at the bulk of out there, starting with Mike's industry, it's all third-party owned, right? No one owns their own utility farm. It's third-party owned. It's supplied to the city. In residential, it's at least 50-50. I don't know the exact stats. But as you move towards in our space, it's going to be leaning more towards third-party ownership because of it. And what's the opportunity? Well, 60% of our electric power can be generated in basin. So just like we saw with utility, it's not really that we're limited in the resources, it's that we need to be organized and be dedicated to it. And thankfully, with this study, I think everyone's now dedicated. What we've tried to achieve at PermaCity is scalability. With that, one of the reasons we joined Catalyze is we recognized that the market was growing quickly. And we as part of that, we have this re-energized platform that we'll talk about in just a second. SolarStrap, I think that's well known. That's on probably more than 60-70% of all the FIT projects. We use it, we make it available to everyone, and it really gets our lightweight roofs built. Battery storage and asset management, we've secured our own battery company. And of course, you got to have comprehensive committed capital. Not fussy capital, but capital that really understands the market. And last slide, please. And just a glimpse is, so we arrived there with technology, and now we recognize the need that we really need to bring Silicon Beach, I could say Valley, but we have our Silicon Beach in LA. And really, how do we, and these little blue dots recognize, like, how do we quickly measure potential, communicate that message so that we can really dive into that 60% resource? And then how do we organize it and operate it? So, so to accelerate that process, we need a platform, and thankfully, PermaCity and Catalyze have made a huge investment into this resource. That's what we're doing as a company. Really excited to see the progress and to work towards this sort of end game of doing our part together with all the other efforts to reach that goal.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's no surprise to see you talking about things that you're working on that are very catalytic, and we're very proud that the policies and the goals in place in Los Angeles are helping underpin that. So that's really, really wonderful. I want to turn to the issues of equity and workforce. You know, one of the things that makes LA 100 as unique as it is not only the scope at which it was looking at the, you know, a grid and operating the resources that we need, but really looking at all of the other issues at play in order to achieve those goals in a city, in an operational city, in practicality. And so how do we ensure, as Jason Rondou was talking about at the top, that our efforts are geared toward equity and that we're preparing and building the workforce that we're going to need? So first, you know, Jason, Barrett, turning over to you, because you have really addressed solar in your career, in your work, from soup to nuts, you know, really from understanding the financing needs, the project development, the technology innovation and deployment. So, you know, now really, and I'd love to hear about how you're turning those solar deployment efforts toward closing the gap in low-income communities of color that we see are not getting the same type of penetration of solar in their communities as we're seeing in other parts of Los Angeles.
Well, first of all, thank you. This is, you know, a very important issue for me. You know, I was raised by a single parent, and when I look at solar, there's no way my mother could have afforded it. So, you know, this brings things 100% home for me. You know, I tell folks I'm a recovering investment banker, even though I think I got promotion because I'm now the SVP of sales. But in my heart, Jonathan knows that there's not a spreadsheet JB has seen that he doesn't like. And also, you know, I've participated with this in the summit for the last couple of years, and hopefully I get invited back next year. And Mary Leslie, I get to shake your hand. And again, I want to thank you and Adam Lane and all the folks putting on this wonderful, because the broader community is looking at what LA is doing. Jonathan forced me to be in a plane coming back to LA. I think I've been to LA close to 100 times now. And that's literally in the last 4 years. So you can imagine many, you know, red eyes, et cetera. But let's talk about equity as is. I sit in a very unique role where I have to act in a fiduciary capacity. We've invested now in about $1.6 billion enterprise value of projects. I've committed in Los Angeles. I've spent a lot of time with Jonathan Port in over $100 million. Of assets, of where we've put money to work, et cetera. And what was very important to me is, how do you create equity within the space? And this was way before, you know, unfortunately, the George Floyd, and there was a lot of, you know, focus around that. I've been doing this for quite some years. So there was a firm that's now cumulatively invested in about 18, they've installed 18,000 solar systems on residential homes. And of that, 75% have been on the LMI community, the, you know, low to moderate income community. And, you know, there was one gating factor, and one factor was FICO score. And, you know, everyone looks at FICO as if FICO is the end all be all, and it's not. You know, in my former life when I was a banker, I also ran the synthetic mortgage business at Fannie Mae. So I recognized the challenges in and around FICO. So the question really is, what is the determining factor? And that is really around the avoided cost savings, or the savings that that family has. So I asked when I went to my committee, and they said, okay, JB, this is a little controversial. Why are you going to bring something that doesn't have a known credit metric? I then looked at the cumulative default rate. So this is when the investment banker showed up, not the sales guy. I looked at the cumulative default rate. And we're actually, it was a better economic investment than investing in traditional solar where they looked at FICO, because our cumulative default rate was lower. Because if you're working in the LMI community, those savings actually mean something. So if somebody decided not to pay and they go back to the grid, that's money directly out of their pocket. When you look at the gross savings, annual savings, for example, in 1 year, we've put somewhere around $8.6 million of savings back into the pockets of folks in that community. Very important. And I've been told, and I'm always nervous when people talk about the multiplier effect, but I'm told that multiplier effect goes up to $25 million. That's not me, but I can tell you we've reduced people's utility bills by $8.6 million. Meaningful. Where do we go from here? We want to find more opportunities like that. We think they exist. We're going to be very forthright with our capital. We're going to be stewards of as investors. But one thing I will say is you can actually hit the bottom line of doing right, doing well, and making sure all communities are included. So that's one of that's kind of my pet peeve. If you look behind, I went to Howard University, so hopefully I learned something when I was there. And what's important now is having our capital, but having a purpose and a principle associated with that capital while maintaining our fiduciary responsibility. The next question, I'll sound like a sales guy, but I apologize. The investment banker came out and me, I apologize.
No, that's okay. It's important to really, be reminded about how all of these things are interrelated. And so not only are you trying to close the financing gap for, low and moderate income, but my understanding is, and maybe you can talk a little bit about, how some of the technology innovation that you're pursuing is also helping close that gap.
Yeah, so this is where it's super exciting. I mean, this week I was in Orlando, I was in Tampa, Orlando, Charlotte, and then I had dinner with a private equity firm in Connecticut. So, and again, this is a highlight of my week, would not miss this. So Standard Industries, the firm that I work for, I work for GAF Energy, but they're an operating unit. One of their operating companies is GAF, and we work, GAF Energy works with GAF. And so we're the largest manufacturer of roofing materials in the world. So think of us as the largest waterproofer. And one thing that we have seen in terms of solar, and taking nothing away, I think solar is phenomenal. But one thing is, as the largest, having the largest market share in the shingle space, it makes no sense to put a brand new roof down and then pierce that shingle and then compromise the waterproofing associated with that. So we've seen it, we encourage, we like what the market has done. We're not belittling any of our competitors, but we thought that there was some technological innovation that could take place. So we came up with a system that's called Decotech. It's readily available now. And what we've done is it attaches directly to a roof deck. So what it does not pierce through the roof, the brand new roof you just put on. So we thought that was super important. So low profile, aesthetically looking good. And that was great. But when you think about, and just to give you a sense of roofing, and again, I've now become a roofing expert. There are about 7 million re-roofs a year in the United States. If you look at roofing where solar has been on cumulatively over its entire existence, 2 million roofs. Remember I said 7 million re-roofs in 1 year. Our material is going about 1 million roofs, over 1 million. So if we can get scale where you can look at your roof as real estate, you can see you can see how that can effectively facilitate a paradigm shift in the market. So what I'm super excited about, we're bringing manufacturing and R&D back to the US. We just announced a couple of weeks ago, we have a facility that's going to be based, it's a 114,000 square foot facility. It's going to be based in San Jose, California. So Jonathan, not Silicon Beach, Silicon Valley. So I can actually say Silicon Valley. We're going to be manufacturing a nailable solar shingle. You heard what I said, a nailable solar shingle. And this is going to be launched in the market. If I were to show it to you now, I probably would not have a job before this thing ended. But we're super excited. We think, we have to, we service several thousand roofing contractors. And we think to get the best time to get solar is when you're getting a new roof. But when you think about it, you have to ensure that the installation process makes sense, and you have to ensure that you have a watertight process. So we want to use our footprint. We want to use the sector of the market that we have the best experience with, roofing contractors, and the fact that we have the largest market share, and bring something to the market that is affordable, looks good from an aesthetic standpoint, but more importantly, provides what its intended purpose is. The intended purpose is to generate energy, but without, creating a waterproofing issue. So again, that's why I love my new job, because I'm a finance guy who gets to go talk to people about, solving problems. Again,
sort of a innovation in finance, innovation in technology. We're talking innovation in policy and implementation. And so, all the examples, very illustrative examples of what's happening on a roof. I also see people on those roofs. And so I want to talk a little bit about workforce and jobs and the opportunities of job creation and job opportunity through everything we're talking about here. So I want to just take the opportunity to bring in Meg into the conversation. LABC is at the forefront of fostering clean tech businesses, integrating diversity, equity, and workforce into that technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Really, LABC is a leading voice on economic and job opportunities of the green economy, and you've recently released a Green Jobs report. So hoping you can talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from coming out of that report, what you're seeing for opportunities for workers and attracting new businesses from all the work happening in LA.
Thank you, Lauren. Great to be here. It's been fabulous to hear everything from the panelists so far. I actually want to begin by harking back to two separate comments that we've already heard this afternoon in this session. First, Jason's recent, just a minute ago, making sure all communities are included, being such an important component of what we do going forward. And then Mike earlier said, with great vision comes great innovation. And both of those jumped out at me because the work that we do at LABC is absolutely in support of both of these. So if you'll forgive me, I'll start my answer with a focus on clean tech innovation and end by bringing it around to workforce implications and share a bit of our Green Jobs report. So, it should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Innovators and founders are attracted to regions that welcome innovation. And one way to signal that welcomeness to innovation is by setting clear and ambitious targets, exactly as the LA 100 plan does, and exactly as a number of other clean tech or green economy efforts in the region also do. For example, I'd mention the 2028 zero emission transportation targets of the Transportation Electrification Partnership as another example of clear and ambitious targets within the region. Having those targets increases the value proposition to founders of founding and running innovative companies here. LABC, as most, if not everyone here knows, is, and as you described in your intro, is at its heart, was at its heart created to help support that degree of innovation and the founders of those companies in accelerating their businesses successfully in the LA region. We have grown since then and enriched what we do and the scope of what we seek to influence and work on. In particular, in this case, I'll bringing it to workforce in terms of community engagement and specifically with respect to workforce. So, recognizing the growth of clean tech companies in LA will also bring growth in clean tech jobs in LA. That really is the kind of the underlying logic in our working both with founders and startup companies and on workforce related issues. So we recently published a Green Jobs report focused on the LA region that estimates that our employment base in the green economy could grow to 600,000 green jobs by 2050. That's a rate of growth that would significantly outpace overall job growth in LA County over the same period. It represents nearly 80% job growth versus 2020 baseline. And countywide overall job growth would be at 40%. If those numbers, if the projections are are achieved. The other really important thing to recognize about clean tech employment opportunities and jobs is that investments in clean tech drive significant job growth. The job multiplier, for example, for every $1 million invested in renewable energy can create 7.5 full-time jobs, which is about 3.5 times the job creation impact of, for example, investing in fossil fuels. Moving outside of renewable energy, thinking about transportation electrification, $1 million invested in transportation electrification can create up to 15 jobs. So we're seeing, significant employment opportunity growth as our collective investment in the clean tech sector accelerates. And the other thing to point out is that jobs in clean tech and the green economy are both accessible and high road. The vast majority of these jobs are available to workers without needing a college degree, and they pay meaningfully more than jobs in more traditional industries. So we really see the innovation side of things and the workforce side of things as two sides of the same coin.
Thanks, Meg. And I think bringing Jonathan back in, you see it, the same way in terms of how you run your business. You've made a point of using veteran contractors and local union labor. So can you talk to us a little bit about why that's been a priority of yours and the work that you've seen come through that?
Yeah, I'm going to just do a brief go back. First of all, I'd really like to thank Jason Barrett, because on the job behind me, when we built this large project, we had a commitment to putting a large veteran vets to work. And Jason, as one of the major funding partners, completely bought into that and helped me make sure that vision was fulfilled. So, as well as many of the other projects he's been involved with. So I want to really acknowledge that. It is just a priority because I can't come up with a better word. It's just a priority. I felt that we have to reinvent the urban framework, and we got vets returning from the destruction of someone else's urban framework. And we've been very lucky in the United States, and they've been really amazing serving peace and safety in the world. That they deserve really good jobs. And by teaming up with the unions, we were able to offer those training programs, career paths, and really a permanent place for them to feel like they're fully participating. So today, inside PermaCity, vets actually make up the majority of not just the workers, but our top management. Our construction company is led by, he's still in the reserves, he was promoted to colonel. We have all different parties, and it's just been really, it's just something we want to do. I can't say it. I think it's the right thing to do, and we have to do it, and we have to include vets, and we have to include low income, and we just found a good path to do that. Fortunately, in LA, we have very high standards. We want to have either a living wage, and then when we do public works, prevailing wage. So it really helps us reward the people. So that's probably one of the best aspects of my job is making sure people have good jobs.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I think that the department, LADWP, and the city really see it the same way, that this is an incredible opportunity as we're remaking our economy and remaking our infrastructure. We have the power to empower communities, both from access to clean energy and access to good jobs. So really appreciate you taking up the mantle there. Before moving on to some group questions, I did want to also recognize that LA 100 doesn't just look at the grid, as I mentioned, in terms of resources. It also took into account the city's goals around transportation and building electrification. So it really looked at not just the grid as we know it today, but the grid as we know we need to develop it to be resilient to climate change and to be able to meet all the other goals that we have in terms of our Green New Deal. And so, Meg, you mentioned transportation electrification. Electricity demand is obviously expected to grow significantly by all of this work, including driven by the growth of electric vehicles. And so can you talk a little bit about how electrification of the transportation sector can actually help this transition?
Yes, excuse me, happy to. The energy transportation nexus is growing increasingly tight and critical both to transportation and to the future of energy and the grid. I think, earlier in the conversation, Jason Rondou pointed out the need for renewable long demand storage located in the city. And, one thing without doubt that EVs are is, in one sense, batteries or energy storage capacity on wheels. And so the emerging innovation space of vehicle to grid integration is one area where we see promise in future of being able to use electric vehicles and their batteries as bidirectional with the grid, not just unidirectional with the grid. So being able to, particularly for vehicles with larger batteries or companies and entities that operate significant fleets of vehicles, being able to rely on the energy stored in the electric vehicles' batteries to help balance both load and demand. The intermittency that is sometimes referred to with respect to renewable energy, and the peaks and valleys of demand on a daily and an hourly basis. V to G is what is referred to in the industry, emerging, nascent. It's been around for a while, but it is certainly still picking up steam and momentum. But I do see it as a really promising opportunity to help both accelerate transportation electrification and accelerate the future of our grid.
Thanks. And I think, one of the exciting and interesting conclusions of LA 100, was that transportation and building electrification really facilitate, that not just the transition, as you said, but also increase the benefits from a health perspective in terms of reduced pollution, coming from these sources, as well as reduced costs because of exactly as you were saying, some of the innovative ways to use the electrification of these sources to really enhance grid operations. So those are exciting to me. Those are really exciting additional aspects of the study that, had we not included those pieces in LA 100, we would have never really understood how much value electrification of other sources can bring. So a couple of group questions here. I want to know from Jason, Rondou, and Mike, what surprised you most about the LA 100 findings? Jason, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I mean, you touched on one of them around electrification, so I'll hit that last. I think the first is we looked at 4 different ways to get to 100% renewable energy, and one of them was very aggressive, looking at 2035. Others said, well, what if we focused on building new transmission, or what if we focused on doing a lot of resources locally and we didn't do as much transmission? No matter what way we get there, there are so many common paths. We know that no matter what, we need to do a lot of resources locally, a lot more. We're already number 1 in solar in the country, and we need to dramatically expand that to get to 100%. Even if we don't focus on transmission, even if that's not a focus of building new transmission corridors, we still have a lot of transmission work that we need to do to upgrade existing transmission lines, not just to get the power to the city, but to get it within the city. So there's a lot of work that we need to do locally. And the last thing that, and you and Meg really touched on this, is transportation electrification. So we have this opportunity not just to decarbonize the grid, but to facilitate the rapid decarbonization of the transportation sector. And that's important, not just from a GHG standpoint, but because if we don't do that, if we don't electrify buildings and if we don't electrify vehicles, the cost of doing this goes up significantly. So to the degree that we're going to be successful, it's going to require the really rapid transformation of moving from gas vehicles to electric vehicles, and its GHGs and its affordability.
Thank you. Mike, how about you? What surprised you about the study? I don't know if you're on mute here.
Sorry, I'm going
There
to
you
give
are.
you a short answer. Sorry, Lauren. The first is I was just really taken aback by how LADWP embraced the results. It's really unprecedented, almost in the world, to have somebody, an agency or a utility like LADWP, embrace something like this, given their scale, their reputation, their responsibility for their customers and all that. And related to that was when the mayor came out and said, hey, we can accelerate this. The idea that resulted in actually better benefits or more benefits was extraordinary. The second thing is how comprehensive the study was. You hit on most of the topics I was going to, so I won't do that. But in terms of the number of modeling jobs and all that went on. But the social justice element of it and the public health element is ahead of its time, right? People, most utilities and power people don't think in those terms. And so that was a unprecedented standard to create. And what I'd say is, as the oldest guy on this panel, I've been around this industry for about 40 years. And I can tell you that it's the first time you start seeing these things coming together, both the technology and the cost reductions and the political will to make it happen. And that's really exciting. And I'll tell you, I'm very active in the American Clean Power Association. We're going to steal a lot of your ideas from LA 100 to try to show elsewhere, because one of the areas that we have not done as an industry nationally is brought those social justice and health issues into our policies and our reasons for asking for certain policy changes, so that they're comprehensive and not just self-serving, like asking for more tax benefits and so on. The third element is the readability of it. I just found it extraordinary that an average person could pick it up and get stuff out of it. That's pretty great. And then the last comment I would make is on my technical side, the fact that they looked at dynamic line rating and rapid and dynamic response to contingent events is fabulous, because had ERCOT done it, had that same attitude, we would have seen a far less impact of the great ERCOT freeze. And so I'm really glad to see, people with a technical background like LADWP thinking, and NRAIL, thinking about these important elements that can help in this effort. So those were my four.
I really appreciate that. And yeah, call on Jason to talk to the Clean Power Association whenever you want. I'll volunteer him.
You've been volunteered, Jason.
It's really important. It is the mayor recently testified before Congress on LA 100 before the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and people really, it was hard for people to wrap their minds around the study and around the conclusions, and as you say, how much we were embracing and running with the conclusions. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and we would really support any efforts to continue to proliferate the work in other jurisdictions. And in terms of Jason, Barrett, and Meg, I want to turn to you. Maybe, and Jason, you came onto this with your investment banker hat on, but again, to be able to accelerate this transition, to make sure that it's equitable and not falling on those with the least resources the most, what are some of the most innovative mechanisms that you would recommend to cover the costs of this transition?
Yeah. So, we're in this business, obviously, there's an ultimate goal. You want to, do good, but also you want to turn a profit. And I think the installation of solar has been where it's been cost prohibitive. And I think so. I came up with a very simple statement before when I said nailable solar shingle. What we've done is, if you look at an average solar system to install, we've actually cut that anywhere between 30 to 50%. The numbers that we're seeing, you can install a solar system, 6 kW system, it could take 6 hours, where somewhere is around 2 hours. So when you take that cost piece out of it, you can provide that to the consumer in savings. So I think that's important, making sure that we're not selling somebody the Hope Diamond, or we're selling something that somebody needs. That's one. I think the second thing is, in terms of the innovation, it's around the financing. When I came into LA, and Mary Leslie asked me to come in, very key with, do what you say and leave, and make sure you mind your manners when you're with folks. So we came in, we put the capital to work. We actually did what we're doing, and Jonathan Porter and Mary Leslie invited us back in. So I think having track record, I see, it doesn't sound like innovation. It's almost like doing simple things, but that allowed us to create a track record where now we're being asked by other cities, albeit not as, at the same level of where you guys are in LA, to facilitate something similar to what we did working in that market.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And Meg, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Financing and funding for this transition is absolutely critical, and it's frankly it's a big mountain to climb. When you look across the board, certainly in the energy sector, absolutely as well in transportation, and so many other components of the various transitions that we all collectively need to be moving forward on. I do want to start by saying, acknowledging how fortunate we are to be in the state of California. And the current and ongoing state leadership helping our state lead the way, both in intention and in action, in making funds available to take action on those intentions. And also now very fortunate in the current administration in DC and the priorities and the investments that they are setting forth there. And I'm optimistic about the prospect of funds coming into the LA region to help further support the transitions that we have underway. I would note, so on a more specific level, I would say that one tool that LABC has been deploying in recent years is that of pilot projects, and getting pilot projects out into communities, out into the wild, so to speak, into real world situations. And funding to make that type of ongoing pilot and then growth scale demonstration projects consistently possible, I think is important because of the many co-benefits that those types of demonstrations can bring with them. Obviously, very useful for proving technologies, innovative and new innovations, very useful for proving business models to the companies that are involved in developing these products and new technologies, but also incredibly useful for increasing public awareness and interest in the clean tech solutions that are in development and coming to market, and helping to drive a greater awareness of the transition that we're in and how it can affect everybody's sort of everyday existence.
Well, just since you talked about that, can you talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement and that kind of the importance of community outreach and education and sort of enduring these goals?
Absolutely. No, happy to. Thanks for the question. Stakeholder engagement, it also goes without saying, but I'll say it, is absolutely essential. Really good stakeholder engagement at the community level across all types of communities helps create really well-informed needs assessments, for example, helps create really smart and well-informed program design and sort of service design. And also has the impact of increasing that awareness and eagerness for the ongoing transition. Some of the pilot projects that LABC's been involved with in the past year or so are very specifically designed to be community benefit pilots. And so these are deployments in underserved or disadvantaged communities across greater LA. For example, we've got projects in Pacoima, in San Pedro, and Leimert Park. And these are created from scratch, from the get-go, as partnerships with community-based organizations. So folks who are on the ground in those communities have the relationships, have the connections, understand the needs and the gaps that these communities face, and can help ensure that the pilot projects, as they are designed and when they are launched, are best tuned to meet those needs. We work with Pacoima Beautiful in Pacoima, and it's a fabulous partnership. They and our other community level partners help us obtain community input in a host of different ways, from surveys to focus groups to one-on-one conversations of users and non-users of the various services that we're piloting. And it's just it's impossible to overstate, I think that's the right way of saying it, the value of that type of input from stakeholders who are living that daily existence.
Thank you. And you also you touched on the hopeful role of the state and federal government and what might be coming our way and what, potential opportunities for support there are. And I just wanted to turn to Jason Rondou, and maybe Jonathan Port, you might have some thoughts on this as well, but what support is needed from the state or federal government to help us reach the LA 100 goals?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few kind of low-hanging fruit. I think the first is going to be transmission. So we know that we need a whole lot more renewable energy. Even as we focus on local resources, we need upgrades to local transmission. And I think there's a role for the state to play and possibly the federal government. And I know that our challenge is not unique to LA. We already have a lot more transmission, I think, relative to many other utilities. And so I know that as other utilities start to embark on studies like LA 100 and really look deeper at what it's going to take to get to 100%, they're also going to, and I think others are starting to find that. So transmission is the big one. Another big one is hydrogen. We can't alone drive down the cost of hydrogen. We can't alone mature that technology. And, while we're playing a leadership role, we do need others to come along with us. And we're trying to do that with a high deal as well. But I do think that there's a role for government entities to really help accelerate that. And the last one I'll touch on is equity. We know that we're going to make somewhere between a $50 and $80 billion investment in modernizing our grid. We know we're going to be doing it largely through rates. And that is a very regressive way to fund a transformation. And we know that we need to make investments particularly with distributed resources, in communities that have not had those resources invested in the past. About 47% of the city is a disadvantaged community as defined by the state, and far less than that has gone into a far lower percentage of DER investment has gone into those communities. And so we have an opportunity now, as this money starts to come in and we make these investments, we have the opportunity to do it right from the beginning rather than try to course correct halfway through.
Thanks, Jason. Jonathan, do you want to add anything? You're on mute.
I always do that. Okay, the good news is I think we're 80% there. The let's say the 10 billion in private capital needed, including us, is here at LA's doorstep to make this happen quick. The challenging on the 20% is I do think that the state needs to mandate that we do use C&I roofs, right, to really encourage the industry. That's the first thing. I do think that C&I needs to be better understood. It's not residential solar and it's not utility solar. And I think a tax credit to stimulate that to go from megawatts to gigawatts is probably in order to really get it taken seriously. And especially if we're going to get the V to G included in there. The capital's here, but I think we just got to take the edge off. So that's my input.
That's really helpful. Well, great timing, because I want to end with a lightning round, hear from everybody. So we've talked a lot about innovation. We've talked about scale. We've talked about finance, jobs and workforce, and equity and inclusion. We've talked about the acceleration of our goal to 2035 and some of what needs to happen between now and 2035 to achieve that 100% zero carbon grid. So from each of you down the line, what do you think is sort of an immediate need that we need to start working on right now? And I'm going to go backwards on the order here. So Meg, why don't we start with you?
I didn't know what backwards meant.
Sorry, I'm going to go in the in the opposite order of
Got it. No worries. So I'm gonna see your request for one item in terms of immediate investments and not comply with that request, because it is, it's a multivariable equation that we are needing to solve. And I was not very good at those in high school, and hopefully I'm trying to help to get better as I'm not in high school anymore. But it really is an interlocking solution set, substantial growth in renewables of both and all the types, and storage capacity to help support that and balance it. Certainly the transmission piece, And, given where I have my day job, I think across all of those items, a resolute focus on both innovation and on workforce development and advancement as we take these strides forward together.
Thank you. And JB, I'm not going to try to say your name backwards, just sticking in that opposite order here. But in the lightning round, what do you think we have to get started on now?
Yeah, I think more investment. When I say more investment, I think we've taken a leadership role, and I'm not saying it to be self-serving, but I invested in a company when nobody would. And I won't tell you the list of investors who are there, but these are like the, kind of the white shoe investors who will follow this, but somebody to take a little bit more risk. I would then say affordability is key. You can build something, if somebody can't afford it, it doesn't make sense. So I think rooftop solar and making it affordable, but by also providing value to the customer where you're not creating an issue, leaks and things of that sort. So I would say, above investment, I'd say affordability, and we just want more people to follow us. So I've done a crappy job of advertising what we've done. Maybe I should hire a PR firm, but we need more firms to take opportunistic investments, and they realize that it's going to work well, investing in the lower to moderate income community as it relates to solar.
Thank you. Okay, continuing down the line, Jonathan, how about you?
I think we need to make a special investment into interconnect automation and controls, because if we're going to roll this out fast, let's make it easy on everyone, and let's make it predictable.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to start with investments in the grid, and the first comment was going to be what Jonathan just said, which was the CNI interconnection. But so I'll go to the big scale, which is more what we're known for. Is I think we need investment in modeling right away and identification of things that can be upgraded and built. Honestly, if that gets identified and gets built out, then the rest of it will fall into place. There's plenty of us out there that can supply the power, whether it's solar on top of roofs or CNI to large scale. So it's really building out a robust grid is the most important, and there's a lot of things that can be done very quickly in that regard.
Thank you. And Jason, Rondou, I hope that you're taking notes on all of these to-dos, but what would you say is top of mind for you?
I think electrification. So with electrification, you can decarbonize multiple sectors. You can bring the cost down. You can make it more affordable. And you have the opportunity to make it replicable. What we are doing here, we're leading the way. We want it to be scalable. And if it can be affordable, if it can be equitable, then it's scalable. So I would say electrification.
Thank you. Good. It's doing multiple things at once. And just want to thank everybody for their really insightful comments and participation, and for your partnership and dedication to helping LA achieve these really historic, visionary goals that are only made possible, only give us collectively confidence because of everyone here who's represented. I would say for me, hearing all of this, ensuring that we're all moving together as a Los Angeles community, ensuring that we are reaching the hardest to reach communities in these solutions to, show that they are accessible, show that there's an economic opportunity, show that there is, an opportunity out of, a lack of investment that they may have experienced to date. And that's what this is really this work is really intended to achieve. It's really about the future of the city overall. And so thank you, everyone. Thank you to LABC, and have a great